There's work suggesting that when dads are more involved at bedtime, kids actually sleep better. So,
I mean, let's say that again.
Yes, when dads are more involved at bedtime, the whole family actually sleeps better. And it may not even be that dads are doing any magic thing. It's just that dad's presence is relieving stress on the whole family system. And going back to the sort of vigilance piece and anxiety and monitoring, dads can also potentially just be a more relaxed presence.
Happy Father's Day weekend. I wanted to share this very special episode with Professor Darby Saxbe, author of the new book, Dad Brain, How Fatherhood Shapes Men's Lives, because it does. And there are a lot of fathers here today and people who are around fathers a lot. So send this to a father that you love, and happy Father's Day. I'm Dr. Aliza Pressman, developmental psychologist, New York Times bestselling author, associate clinical professor at the Icahn School of Medicine, and the host of Raising Good Humans podcast. I am so glad you're here.
I just want to show everybody this galley, Dad Brain, The New Science of Fatherhood and How It Shapes Men's Lives by Darby Saxbe. Okay, Professor Saxbe, I want to talk about dads, and we are going to honor them properly because to date, what has the research been on dad brains?
Very inadequate. Yeah. And that was one of the things that motivated me to write this book. So, you know, when we think about parenting research, and you know this because this is your world, most of the studies are focused on moms. Attachment studies, bonding studies, almost all of those were done with moms and kids.
Yeah.
So there are just a lot of gaps in the literature. And I think our appreciation of fathers kind of lags behind because we just don't have the science to kind of back up their importance.
I'm remembering in graduate school, we were doing like a little seminar and our professor said, you know, she liked to say controversial things and and then have us all talk amongst ourselves. And she said, "Did dads matter?" That was obviously a long time ago. And of course they matter. But I would like to orient this conversation around why they matter and what's happening to their brains and what their contributions are and all of the work that you do.
Definitely. Yeah. And so I'm curious, when she asked that question, what did you say?
Well,
what was the response from the class?
I'm like, in my defense, I was not a mother at the time. And I said, they matter if there isn't a mother, or they matter if the mother isn't able to provide the care and connection because of something that she's going through. But do they matter like on their own, just as a dad? I don't know that I was in a place to say.
And so now you would disagree?
Now I would, you know, I'm so careful because like if somebody's listening who's raising their child without a father, I feel like you still probably need to find male figures in that child's life who really like is there for them. And then I think it's totally fine. But I think that a father figure matters.
Yes, I'm with you. And I think the science would support that. And, you know, this is one of the themes in the book. I think one of the coolest and most unique things about being human is that we are alloparental. So we evolved as cooperative breeders. We raise kids in community. We, know how to take care of each other's babies. And that makes us different from a lot of other mammals where, if something happens to mom in sort of the early weeks or months of a baby's life, that's sort of the end of that baby's life. And we have this flexibility where caregivers can step in when mom is absent, when she's distracted, or even when she's present and just needs a break, we tag team. And I think that makes us more resilient. It makes us more flexible. And so I think fathers are clearly a key part of that kind of alloparental band of humans, but they also make their own really unique contributions. And like you said, having a male figure, right? Just the fact that they're male provides a different kind of experience, whether you're raising a boy or a girl, right? They can be a different kind of model. And
they communicate differently.
Right. They bring these kind of special attributes. And, not every father parents in the same way, just like not every mother parents in the same way. So there are totally cuddly dads and there are super active moms. But we know in general, dads tend to engage in more vigorous, kind of exploratory play. They're kind of testing kids' boundaries. They're the parent that will often, throw a baby up in the air and catch them, play chase and tickle, encourage a kid to climb higher on the slide. And that is really good for kids building confidence. And I think when you think about kids' anxiety and sort of the way that parenting has changed, and we don't always let kids have as many opportunities to explore and get hurt and try new things, dads actually can play, I think, a really valuable role.
I'm only smiling because I'm thinking about how I would not go to the playground when the kids were little, because I was just like, I'm going to spend the entire time being like, wait, don't do that. Get down. And I knew that was not okay, but I absolutely couldn't change my behavior. So I was like, I'm just not a playground person. Yeah, their dad was so much more able to tolerate the things that I couldn't tolerate.
Yeah. And I think that's really the key, is sort of like whatever the balance of attributes within a parenting couple or, whatever parenting situation, that kids get different kinds of experiences from different kinds of caregivers. So, maybe you're the more vigilant caregiver who's more safety conscious. And that's a role that a lot of moms play. But they're also getting that kind of like more physical active opportunity for play. And so that is just like giving kids more input and more opportunities and more chances to learn. And so kind of that in and of itself, I think is really valuable for kids.
So I want to get into this transition to parenthood and dad brain. I'm just remembering also, which I did tell the father of my children, that when a dad helps with homework in middle school, girls in particular tend to do better. So I think that goes back to like the type of communication or the style, right?
Yeah. And that is a research finding. There's also work on dads reading to kids, that's really good for kids forging literacy. There's work suggesting that when dads are more involved at bedtime, kids actually sleep better. So
let's say that again.
Yes. When dads are more involved at bedtime, the whole family actually sleeps better. And it may not even be that dads are doing any magic thing. It's just that dad's presence is relieving stress on the whole family system. And going back to the sort of vigilance piece and anxiety and monitoring, dads can also potentially just be a more relaxed presence. So there was a big Pew study that just looked at different parenting attitudes, and, moms were much more likely to say they worried about their kids. Dads were more likely to say that they wanted their kids to have freedom. So it's just those kinds of differences in attitudes that can, again, just present kids with different opportunities.
Okay, so let's talk about this dad brain, like what's actually happening to a dad's brain, because we talk a lot about mom's brains, but there's so much research that you've done that I think is pretty exciting.
Yes, thank you for saying that. Yeah, and I think that's right, that when a woman becomes a mother, we see this totally visible transformation, right? Assuming it's a biological pregnancy. And we don't always appreciate that it can be transformational for men as well. And so I've done work on how men's brains change from pregnancy into the first year postpartum, scanning men, in the lab before their child's birth and then after. And we find that men are losing gray matter volume, which is actually, as you probably know, has also been found in new moms. They're losing that gray matter volume kind of at a different magnitude and in slightly different places. But it's a very sort of similar pattern where we think the brain is remodeling to streamline and make connections more efficient. And so although it sounds bad, I always caveat this, that you're losing gray matter volume, you are developing this kind of more efficient, lean and mean, edited brain.
I want to expand on that because it's also that same thing of mom brain as a negative that I think is a misrepresentation. So
yes,
let's talk more about what that really means in terms of that development.
Yeah, I think people hear about brain changes and they immediately kind of adopt this deficit model that like mommy brain is this stigmatized, like I'm forgetting my keys. Yeah, exactly. But like if you look at animal models, new moms are amazing at retrieving their pups, often who are buried. Like if you're thinking about a rodent under layers of bedding. I know it sounds, but this like pup retrieval is a model that's been used for a lot of different kinds of studies of rodent mothering. And so it's like by smell and by kind of like your spatial navigation memory, you can find your pups. And so that's rodent mothering.
Right.
And so you have this really keen sensitivity and memory for the things that are salient to the parenting experience.
And
right?
your car keys are not.
Yeah. So it's almost like your brain is maybe filtering out what doesn't matter as much. I mean, car keys matter, but not as much as where your baby is.
Yeah.
And you are paying more attention to the things that will keep your new offspring thriving. And so my hunch is that we're seeing similar reasons for that change in dads. So they're also losing volume in parts of the brain that we call the mentalizing network. Mm-hmm. So these are the parts of the brain that think about other people's minds, that engage in social cognition, that we think of as kind of our platform for empathy. And it seems like when dads are changing more in those areas, I found that they are reporting more time with their babies, more enjoyment of their babies, more motivation to be with their babies. So all of these things are kind of like moving in step with the sort of emerging father-child relationship.
The brain is both more vulnerable at this point and more flourishable. If that's a word.
I really liked how you said that. Yeah. Yeah. Like I always say, it's like any time of change is like a time of opportunity.
Right.
And also risk, also vulnerability.
How does that shift our, like if you are currently in process right now, like you are a new father or you're thinking about this, what kinds of changes, what kinds of potential is there?
Yeah. Yeah. And so like as you're incubating that new parental brain, right? Like there's learning opportunity, like your ability to be sensitive, to be empathetic, to be tuned to the signals of your baby, like all of that is getting totally honed. And that can also come with some mental health downsides. So in my lab, the same study that I just told you about, where we found that dads who lost more gray matter volume had better attachment, bonding, motivation to spend time with the infant, we also found those dads were reporting increasingly worse sleep across the transition to parenthood. They were reporting more depression and anxiety. So we controlled for their prenatal depression and anxiety. We found, the dads whose brains changed the most were at risk of having more depression and anxiety after birth. So it's like there is this cost of caregiving, but I think there's also these benefits to how you relate to other people, how connected you can be to your own child. Yeah. And I think a lot of moms would agree with this, right? It's like, it's this magical transition. You fall in love with this other human, but it can be isolating, it can
identity.
Be draining. Yes. Who am I? Right. And I think to whatever extent dads are really stepping up and taking an active role, they're also experiencing similar costs and benefits.
Do you think that if you had done this study 50 years ago, you would have seen the same changes in the brain? Or is this partly a function of dads today being more engaged?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I'm thinking about what the 60s MRI machine would have looked like. It probably would have taken up like a whole building. I don't think we would have seen the same changes. And so we have seen this transformation in how men are showing up as parents. and how they're thinking about parenthood. So millennial dads, Gen Z dads, they are parenting in a totally different way than like silent generation, boomer generation did.
Yeah.
And what my work really has found, and this is something I tried to emphasize in the book, is that these changes come online as we get experience, as we get practice. So it's not just that like every dad is going to have
just
this
comes out
dynamic brain, right? It's like we care first and then we adapt.
Because the act of caregiving is building or transforming this brain.
Exactly. That like we are shaped by our care. So I think a lot of the time, and I think this is true with kind of gender stereotypes, like there's this idea that moms are just born like knowing how to take care of a baby.
Right.
That they have these skills, that it's almost like this trait. And I think it's really more like a state. It's kind of like we can all learn this. We can all adapt to becoming great caregivers, but we kind of have to give ourselves the opportunity to practice and to get to know our kid.
And so if over time it is just like women are expected to and therefore do all of this caregiving, their brains are getting shaped through these repeated acts of caregiving. And now dads in their repeated acts of caregiving are building these connections, which when you were saying that, the risk is also more higher rates of depression and things that probably a lot of moms recognize. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if relationships overall throughout the lifespan are such a predictor of longevity and health and mental health. Is this like powerful time where you're growing these connection skills? Like if we fast forward, are we exercising muscles? Are dads exercising muscles that are going to now allow them better, stronger connections?
Yes, I think so. And I love that reframe, right? Because it's kind of like by investing in our relationships, it's hard. Like it's hard to take care of a really vulnerable child. But I think there is this long range payoff in terms of our social integration, our connection, our sense of legacy, our sense of reward. And so, I did not want this book to just be bad news for dads.
Yeah.
It's not like your brain is changing in a way that's going to make you more depressed. It's that like, this is hard work and you have this future of having raised this person that you can hopefully be proud of. And, like when you look at what really determines health and longevity in men and women, it's the quality of your relationships. Mm-hmm. And, I'm sure the Harvard Grant study.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of.
Yeah, I cite that in the book. Yeah, it's this like amazing, long running study. I think it started in the 1920s. Mm-hmm. They recruited Harvard undergrads alongside a community sample of inner city boys from Boston. And they followed them into adulthood. And now they're actually following the grandkids. So like wild. A lot of these guys are like 100 years old, many have passed on, but they have found kind of consistently, it is not how much money you make, how much professional status you gain. It is, do you have a happy marriage? Are you happy in your family relationships? That seems to determine how long these guys live.
And the quality of
satisfied. Exactly. Like that sort of like satisfying old age.
What's so funny? It's like, and this happens sometimes with research where there's like, you need grants, you need evidence, you need multi-year studies. In this case, it's the longest, I think the longest
longest running
one
study of human development, I think.
But then you say it out loud and it's like, that makes
sense. Right. Yeah. It's intuitive.
It's over 100 years, this study.
But it's interesting because it makes sense to us, but it's also like, culturally,
it doesn't line up.
Yes. Like a lot of young people, and especially young men, are getting this message that you need to, chase wealth and status. The manosphere is all about like relationships are disposable. You should work on your muscles. And that's just the opposite of what we know about kind of like what makes the good life.
And that was the title of Robert Waldiger, who's running that study now, his book, The Good Life, right?
That's right.
Typically, you become a father while you're also trying to start your career in the kind of way that's, where you have to show up a little bit more and really grind potentially. Mm-hmm. And yet it's also a time where all this investment in this early relationship matters so much. So what did you see in your research about kind of there's so many different directions that could go in. So just all of it.
Yeah, I think it's really hard for men, especially because they are socialized to have more breadwinner pressure. So they might feel like, I cannot take time off, for example, after a baby's born, even though that might be the right thing to do for developing this relationship. It comes with too much of a career penalty, and that's going to be stigmatized. And in the book, I talk about there are some international models of incentivizing men to take paternity leave through basically like use it or lose it programs. Like there are these nudge programs where if the couple gets a certain amount of leave and some is earmarked for dad, and if dad doesn't take it, it goes away. So I think programs like that can actually be really helpful because a lot of the time, and we see this in the States, like even when a man has paid paternity leave, he doesn't take it.
Right.
Or he takes the absolute minimum. And we still have this kind of ideal worker expectation. So I think that's changing a lot. Like if you ask young men what's important to you and what are you looking for in a career, contrary to what the manosphere is saying, I think a lot of Gen Z men are actually saying, I want flexibility. I want to be home with my kids. So they're kind of voting with their feet. Like I think our approach to career has changed a lot because remote work and, the younger generations are experiencing work very differently than I think our generation did.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of good. And that is also changing how dads show up. Because if you're home and not commuting, you have a whole different relationship with dinner time.
Yeah. What would you say to a young dad right now? And what would you say to a young mom who, by the way, I don't know why I keep saying young. I'm like acting like we're 180 years old, but
seasoned grannies. Yes, a new dad
and a new mom. And what are some things that a new mom can do? Like I remember back in 2007, there was like dads in the cohort that I was in, all were doing the 5 S's. Yes. I think they were the Harvey Karp because it was so followable and it was like very action oriented, like swaddling and swinging and shushing and all of the things. And I remember just all the dads kind of around our group of friends that was like, they had a concrete suggestion and they took it on and they were like, I'm going to do this. And I think that just probably because it was like actionable, made sense. And you didn't need to be feeding or
totally.
But what are some of the things that are helpful to sort of engage dads?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, my husband was all about the swaddle. Like he got so good at doing this like perfectly tight swaddle. I'd be like, where are the baby's arms? Like, will she have any sensation in her fingers when she gets out of this? And I think you're totally right. It's like that feeling of I can be useful and I know what to do. And I think that's where a lot of dads are kind of floundering in those early months because it's like mom has this head start of like, if it's been a biological pregnancy, like she feels like she already knows the baby in some way.
Yeah.
And a lot of men report that they have a hard time early on because I'm like an appendage, I don't have a clear role to play. So I think this is one of those things where it's really helpful for couples to talk it out before the baby comes and try to think about, what is the mom feeling like she's going to need? But then also not for dad to wait for mom to ask for help.
That's a great
be
tip.
Proactive. I think that's huge.
Yeah.
And like, if you feel inept, if you feel like you don't know what to do, the only way to get better is to practice. It's like, if you don't know how to throw a baseball, you don't just like leave the team, right? Like you get coaching, you practice a bunch, you you go to the field. And so like dads need to build that confidence. And I think the more the couple can work together to create opportunities for dads to like have a solo afternoon with the baby, like be in charge of, you take all the nighttime diaper changings, whatever it is that kind of makes sense for their situation. I think it's like one of those things where like the only way out is through.
Right. And you just take it on. And if, one of the things that comes up so often is I was doing Saturday and Sunday mornings, let's say, just to lean into stereotypes. I was doing the mornings on the weekend, but my baby, and this would have to be an older baby that is really able to communicate this, but basically they want mom and they don't want dad. And so dad then feels helpless and is like, okay. And then they give up.
Yeah.
And or mom is like, I got this. Yeah. Like maybe it's not said in as generous a way. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think those times when even if your little one is like, no, I want mom to do it, to have the confidence to say like, that's okay. You can want mom to do it. And I'm still here and I love you and I'm going to keep going and not feel like I'm a failure would be so, it's of service to mom. It's of service to the baby in that relationship. And then you over time get so much more confident.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that can be really empowering for dads is like, don't take it personally.
Right.
Kids are fickle. My daughter went through a huge only daddy phase and I found it demoralizing as a new mom. And I just had to realize like, this is healthy. She's experimenting with relationships. And, before I knew it, she was in an only mommy phase.
And then did you wish for the only daddy phase a little?
Then I was like, maybe dad could come back into the picture a little.
Yeah.
But it's like kids are playing with boundaries and they're figuring out their relationships. And so they will sort of they will test and prefer different caregivers at different times. And I think that's a place where a lot of dads can get checked out. And I think moms can also unwittingly reinforce this dynamic.
Right.
And so in the book, I talk about maternal gatekeeping.
Yes.
I don't want to be negative about moms who do it because I think it is frequently really well-intentioned. And mom does feel like the expert in the kid. If she has longer maternity leave, if she, is breastfeeding, like there is an ease that she has with soothing the baby. And so it's easy to want to jump in and just be like, try it this way. She prefers this blanket, but like dads need to have their own style. And if it's kind of micromanaged by mom, I think it's like any, like workplace situation. It's like, you don't want a boss that's telling you how to write an email, right? Like you need to have your own comfort level with what you're doing.
It's even the same as we would say in parent-child relationships, like if you're micromanaging instead of scaffolding and setting free for autonomy support, you're like, it's well-meaning, but it's maybe overbearing or controlling accidentally.
Yeah. And I think dads can be complicit in this dynamic too. Like they can take the baby and then when baby cries, like come right back, like, well, here.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not easy, but sometimes moms just need to like leave the house.
Yeah. Like even if it's going to be a mess.
Go for a walk.
Disaster.
Yes. And just like make peace with the fact that your partner and baby are going to have to muddle through. Like it's uncomfortable.
Right.
But anytime we learn something new that's hard, we go through a certain amount of discomfort. So again, I think that's where pushing back on this innate trait that moms have that dads don't is helpful, because if dads feel like this is something I'm capable of learning and excelling at, they will hopefully feel more motivation to keep trying.
Can you talk a little bit about attachment relationships between fathers and children? Because now that you're talking about this, I realize I think there is that tone of one, like that we use, and you said alloparenting. So I kind of feel like you teed me up for this. But what are the misunderstandings about those attachment relationships?
Yeah, I think we often think about attachment as this like mother-baby quality or phenomenon. And actually, there's a researcher I cite in the book, Pascal Vertica, who studied a lot of attachment dynamics. And one of his big findings is that toddlers have very similar levels of attachment to their moms as to their dads. So it's not the case that this is like a soul.
Like a one person, like you got to pick.
Exactly. And so it's actually really healthy to develop secure attachments to more than one caregiver. And I think like sometimes attachment parenting can kind of run with this idea of no separation from, between mom and kid. And attachment parenting to me is totally different from what attachment theory
I feel it's irresponsible to name it that because they're unrelated.
Yes.
And it feels like, oh, this might be rooted in some deep, developmental research, but
it's not.
Let's go there.
Yes. No, it is totally, it is totally not what attachment theory says. So, attachment theory, like the way that you measure the security of a young child's attachment, as I'm sure you know, is through a paradigm called the strange situation. You bring kids into the lab, the mom or caregiver sort of introduces them to a stranger and then leaves. And you see how the baby reacts. And the babies who kind of lose it and cannot kind of handle that separation are actually considered to be anxiously attached. So I just think it's so interesting that we test this through separation. And yet if you talk to the most hardcore attachment parents, they don't believe that mom and child should ever be separated.
Right. And then they don't have the opportunity for the reunion where they would have the repair of the connection, which is how you build stronger attachment relationships.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've talked to attachment parents who don't think that they should ever hire a babysitter, for example, because that will somehow disturb the attachment relationship. But A, that's exhausting for the parents.
That's so tiring.
It's so tiring. And B, having a positive connection to a caregiver, a babysitter, can be really good for kids.
Yeah.
So, and I think similar with dads and kids, like, it's like the more the merrier, right? Like kids are built to attach. Like we evolved to be very good at bonding with caregivers, which is very smart of us because we need intensive care to stay alive.
Yeah.
And so we kind of have this innate, like drive to seek proximity and care. And, even if you think about like baby faces and how cute they are, right? Like we are built to just like bond.
Yeah. I'm even just picturing a baby face and feeling a little snugglier.
Totally. Like we evolved as humans to have these appealing, adorable features so that people would want to pick us up and cuddle us and take care of us. And that includes, not just mom.
I'm really glad you said that. And I guess I should say, because I was a little hard on attachment parenting, if that's your approach and you love it and it feels good and it's working for your family, Godspeed. Mm-hmm. I think it's the difference between that and thinking that it's rooted in some kind of evidence that you'll have a stronger connection.
Yes.
Like you might, because your mood is lifted by it and you feel connected. But I'm always concerned when people feel the pressure to do it because they think that somehow they're going to have a better connection.
Right. Or that the science is saying that you have to parent this way for an optimal child outcome. Yeah. My thing is like anything that people are, if it's working for your kid and you're happy, great.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea that you feel guilty every time you step away from your child because you've kind of internalized this idea that any separation will damage them.
Right.
Like that's not really what we know from our science.
It's not.
Yeah.
That is also inspiring for dad brain because just going to keep doing that because it's lonely forgetting that there are other people there to care.
Yeah, that's right. We need support like that. We were not designed to parent alone in isolation. And, in some ways, like I talked to an anthropologist who has studied hunter-gatherer societies and the extent to which there's just, trading off, holding each other's children, like monitoring of kids. And he actually made a really interesting point. Like he has studied hunter-gatherer fathers, but he said in some ways in contemporary societies, there's actually more pressure on dads because you don't have the alloparental support of the intergenerational, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, older kids. You just aren't as surrounded by that community.
Right.
So all the alloparental network pressure kind of gets put on dad. He's like the only other adult in the room. And that's actually not great either.
Right. We do need a little bit more of I have it a little more here in California than I did in New York City, but that sense that we're all kind of looking out for each other's kids, and it's such a special thing. Like, I wish we could recapture that a little bit.
Yeah. The village.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need a village. Yeah.
My husband is a widower. And so he's been the sole parent for 7 years. Watching a village try to come together in support of that experience. And I think also having the experience of learning about what it's like to be a mother and a father in one body.
Yeah.
I think his brain is wildly different because of it, and so incredibly empathetic and thoughtful. And but I didn't know him before. I'm sure he was also empathetic and thoughtful, but his insight into, like, now he's on the mom chats, and like all of the things where he's the only dad there and it's otherwise mostly moms, unless it's a 2-dad family.
Yeah.
And it's a wild ride, I think, to see that this, like, culturally, just like it's such a different role.
Yes. Yeah. I think we have these communities of mothers that often exclude men.
Yeah.
And, like, when you become a mom, you are sort of like initiated into this society of moms, which is good, which is, what we need. And dads can be a little more left out. And so they sort of have to forge those connections, and I think, like, I was just talking to someone the other day who's like, yeah, we have a dad club. We meet once a month at the bar. Most people don't show up, but, but it's like you sort of do just, like, have to make it happen.
I think, like, if that could happen more often, because you're right, I feel like there is an initiation for moms. You get some community. And if you don't, it's a little easier to find. And I encourage people to do that. And moms are, like, just looking for that mom who's, like, on the same page that they can hang with.
Yeah.
And I don't know that dads have the personality or confidence or time or interest in doing that. But how life-changing are your mom friends?
Yeah. I mean, like, I would not have survived the first few years without, like, play dates with other moms. But I think it's interesting because there also is, like, a policy level kind of difference there. Like, in Sweden, there is this whole thing about the latte papas.
Oh, wow.
They're the men that hold their takeout cups of coffee and they're pushing strollers all over Stockholm. And it's like this subculture of, like, dads who meet up at cafes.
Oh, yeah.
And I spent a semester living in Barcelona when I did my Fulbright. And similarly, you would see all these young dads with kids just, like, pushing strollers around, walking with kids, holding hands. And so I think when you have the kind of policy landscape that sort of builds in protected time for dads to take off and that's normalized, it is easier for dads to make those connections, right? Like, they have that special space. And there's even, like, in Denmark, it's really normal for parents to work part-time when kids are young. And a really normal schedule is like a 4-day work week with a day off for parenting.
Right.
And they actually call it the Papa Dog, which is like the father day. So, like, the dad gets a day at home with kids. And there was a TV show called Papa Dog, which was, like, about 5 men hanging out at the playground.
That's so great.
Isn't that so cool? Don't you want to see, like, a US version of that?
Yes. That's a pitch.
But it would be harder to do it here because you don't have that scaffolding of, like, it's super normal for men to be home taking care of kids.
Right.
You kind of need that. And then you create, like, the coffee clutch.
So what are your recommendations for, this is such a cruel thing to ask a researcher, except you have this. So, and this is for parents.
Yeah.
also.
Yeah.
So what are the things that you were just like, I want to get this across to fathers and mothers
Yes.
and everyone?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing, and we've talked about this already, is just to feel empowered that you can do this and you can be great at it. And to not decide that you lack the wiring, right? Like, we know that our brains adapt to care and we can learn through care. And I think another piece is just like recognizing how transformative this time is. And we already talked about this, like vulnerability plus opportunity. It's like you can learn a lot, you can develop a lot of closeness. You might also struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And like there's a chapter on perinatal mood disorders in men, and they often go unrecognized. So men can learn the signs of, mental health problems and get help. So that's another piece.
What are those signs?
So I'm glad you asked. So postpartum depression can show up differently in dads than it does in moms. So it might not be uncontrollable sadness. It might not be tears. It might be like irritability. It might be withdrawal, like just like dad doesn't want to be around the kid. It can be intense, like hyperfocus on work. So I wonder, and I talked to a mental health provider who thought this as well, like how much of father absence is driven by untreated perinatal mental health problems.
Wow.
In new dads. It's like that distance, that pulling away. Dads feel like, I can't do this. They're overwhelmed. Like some of that could just be depression talking.
Right.
Which is not to say like, dad should take off because they're struggling.
Right.
But rather because men don't necessarily know what's happening and don't know how to get help, they are removing themselves from the family in a way that can have negative consequences for them and for their kids.
If a partner is noticing that, what would you recommend?
Yeah. So talk to a therapist, talk to a physician, pay attention to those signs. And, like we stigmatize, I think, mental health problems in men.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all this research that suggests that men are less likely to seek help, especially talk therapy. And so, like the first thing is just to overcome that resistance and normalize that this is part of being a good dad, is knowing that you're not doing well and wanting to be the best father for your kid means getting help. There are treatments that can be effective, like some of the same treatments that we know are really effective for new moms, like cognitive behavioral therapies. Mm-hmm. Medication might make sense for some dads. In some cases, baby blues are just driven by sleep deprivation and isolation. And it's about getting social support and building healthier routines. So I think there are a lot of like sort of lifestyle tweaks to make. Mm-hmm. And then there's sort of a higher level of, okay, this is a problem. I need to talk to somebody.
If you're a father listening to this, or a mom or grandparent, or really anybody, but you're thinking of a dad who's been at this for years, but really wasn't approaching their role with this in mind, how, like, I'm getting at, like, brain plasticity in later fatherhood.
Yes.
Talk to us.
Yes. So this is a really cool emerging line of research that I talk about in the last chapter, that parenting actually seems neuroprotective in late life. So we have these big UK biobank studies that include thousands of brain scans of people in their 50s and 60s. And it turns out for both men and women, having had more children is linked with markers of a younger looking brain. So it's like this like healthier, more resilient, there are some resting state connectivity studies too that suggest it's like a more flexible, more connected brain. So there's something about, and we've been kind of talking about this idea that parenting is building this brain that has these benefits, these new skills. There's something about that actually seems to help us age better.
Come on. Oh, man.
So that's
How
my
great
pitch.
Is that? That's a great pitch.
It's a great pitch. And it's what's interesting to me about the research is because it pops up in dads as well as in moms. It's clearly not just pregnancy hormones. It's not birth. It's not breastfeeding, right? It's not like there's this reproductive transition that is unique to women that is somehow getting encoded in the brain. It's like, this is probably parenting experience. And it's probably also just social integration. Like, we know social isolation is bad for the brain. So it's like, men who have these richer lives where they are, part of a family, see this neurological benefit.
That is so cool. That is so cool. And that is our Father's Day message.
Wonderful.
And everybody can get Dad Brain. And also, you're on Substack.
I am.
And you write beautiful articles on Substack.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's kind of my fun hobby. That's where I go to rant.
I love it. It's so good.
I'm unleashed over there.
Thank you for joining me for this conversation. Please stick around and subscribe to this channel for more episodes and practical content that you can learn from and use in your parenting in real time. Watch the next video here or sign up for my Substack newsletter at dralizapressman.substack.com and consider becoming a paid subscriber for access to me live each month in our subscriber Q&A.